No, it's just a busy week with committee deadline week, so we'll have a lot of issues going through committee this week. The week after this week, we'll start getting into executive noms quite a bit, and as you know, we changed the process on that, and we'll continue the process we started last year. We made some improvements over the past interim, and hopefully you'll see those. Also, this is kind of more of a housekeeping thing, but we want to make sure that what we're delivering out of the Senate is helpful to the media as far as what you're looking for. So we're probably going to send out a survey or questionnaire about what we do, these type of weekly press conferences, other things that we push out, and see if you're finding them helpful and useful. So just be looking for that. We'd really like to have your input on that. Other than that, open it up to questions.
SB 13, where's it stand?
It's not on the agenda today. I still am not supportive of it, although I share the goals of the author.
Will it be heard this week?
That's a question for Senator McCourtney. I'm not supportive of it. Senator McCourtney did not put it on the agenda today, and it's the last scheduled meeting before this deadline, but that's a question for him. My position has not changed on it.
Is your caucus divided on Sooner Care 2.0?
Are they divided on Sooner Care 2.0? I think there's still a lot of questions about how is it implemented. As far as trying to make sure we maintain flexibility as the state of Oklahoma and not have something enshrined in the Constitution that is rigid and inflexible, I think we're pretty unified as far as the delivery method and as far as just details as you move forward. There's still some questions about how is it implemented.
According to the governor's office, all you guys need is pass the SHOP legislation to advance at least the first part of its plan to submit the state plan amendment. Do you know if there's any plans in the work for that or discussions with the House or anything like that?
We continue to have a conversation on SHOP and make sure that it maintains flexibility for hospitals if the FMAP dollars ever go down, so you don't want to go up all the way to the 4% cap that's currently in statute. Conversations are ongoing though.
Is your caucus considering just traditional Medicaid expansion? You're worried about putting something, enshrining something in the Constitution. Why not just go the legislative route and do it?
Well, part of that conversation is the SHOP mechanism and making sure you get the financing. You have to come up with anywhere between $120 to $150 million. And SHOP is an integral part of that, but unless you go all the way to 4, even if you go all the way to 4, you can't exclusively fund it on SHOP. And so we're looking at funding options.
But they both cost the same, so why 2.0 over traditional?
I think that's a misnomer. I don't think they will cost the same. If you have the ability to have some control, I think that you can control cost a little bit more. And you also, if the 90-10 match ever goes down, you have flexibility as you move forward. So I would argue with the premise of the question.
Any guess on when we'll see legislation on Medicaid expansion?
No.
Mr. Pro Tem, unless you have a follow-up, what was your caucus reaction or your reaction to the budget numbers certified by the Board of Equalization last week?
Yeah, I think it's best summarized by one of my colleagues that said it's the best worst news we've got on the budget since we've been here. So I've been here since the shortfall of $1.3 billion, $800 million, $700 million. Last year was a very good year budget-wise for us because a lot of the hard work we had done 2 and 3 years ago. The good thing is we left $200 million on the table and put it in the stabilization fund for about $1 billion in reserve. So we're in a very strong position. As far as the state, you don't want to bury your head in the sand though. $80+ million down is concerning. People are hurting. There are jobs that have been lost in particularly the oil and gas industry. And we're not naive to that fact, but we're in a very good position budget-wise for the state of Oklahoma.
I assume you were already, discussing how you want to balance the idea of a little more savings that the governor talked about in State of the State versus some of the investments that he and your caucus probably want to make. Can you explain how that balance discussion goes and maybe whether that changes at all with this news?
That's something that will be ongoing all the way through May. And so it's always a delicate balance between making sure that you keep enough in reserve that you can withstand rainy days, which we're in right now, or making sure that we provide the services that people depend on, and that balance will be reached, I'm sure. We have to get to a balanced budget, and so I'm confident that we'll reach agreement on that, but it won't be any time in the next couple of weeks.
What are the big bills coming up this week?
To be honest with you, I've been having all these discussions on healthcare, and I've been that's sucked the oxygen out of the room on other conversations of other topics of importance. I obviously want to see us move forward on merit protection and the adjustments we're making there, so we're having ongoing discussions. I hope to have a meeting with OPEA sometime in the near future to discuss that as we move forward. As far as big legislation in committee this week, I honestly don't know all the ones that you may be interested in.
A couple of these domestic abuse bills are going to be on the floor today. What are your thoughts on those?
Well, we need to make sure when we're doing criminal justice reform that we keep that pendulum balanced. And there's a lot of issues that have been raised since the passage of criminal justice reform, of some issues with strangulation and rape within marriage and other issues that are of great importance. We need to make sure that people who are victims of domestic abuse are protected by the law, and we're going to move to that end.
How many executive nominations do you all have to?
I don't know. We can get Aaron to get you that number. I don't know off the top of my head, but they're going to be trickling in. We already have quite a few built up. Public safety already did the John Scully nomination last week, but he went through the new process we created.
Doing it today.
Are they doing it? Well, they already put it on the agenda. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. I had a conversation last week with Chairman Shaw. That's the reason I was thinking. I saw it on the agenda and I said, hey, has he been through the process?
What is that process?
So the process is making sure that they meet with members of that committee on a one-on-one basis in their office or off campus, either one, before they're ever granted a hearing. So every member is afforded the opportunity to sit down and visit with that person one-on-one, ask any questions, raise any concerns they may have before we're even considering putting them on the agenda. Now, a member can't just drag their feet and withhold a meeting for weeks on end, but we want to make sure they actually have thorough vetting, and then we want to make sure there are actual substantive questions asked in that committee process.
What is your position on some of these bills that change or lessen qualifications for things like mental health commissioner, health commissioner?
Well, when we did the reform last year, we gave a lot more flexibility to the governor and who they could choose. I'm looking with interest at the health department and the commissioners of the land office that were appointed. And I'm still trying to wade through my own concerns there, so I don't have a definitive position on that yet. The bills, I think, have titles off on the ones that are advancing out of the Senate at least, and we're going to have that discussion with the governor on what are his thoughts on that.
Didn't you do that for Allball? Didn't you?
Yeah, there was there was an adjustment for Allball 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. But I want to look at these with their own merit. Is there some reason that these qualifications were put in, or was it just to put in to safeguard one individual? And I don't know the history of some of those. So that's part of I'm just a deliberative person by nature, so I want to go and look and see what the history was.
Do you have any thoughts on, this is a bad way to start the question, but it seems that there might be several bills working their way through the process on mental health. I don't know whether it's more than normal, but as mental health ties into physical health and potential discussion on Medicaid expansion, do you have things you're excited about in terms of mental health care? We've been talking about that a lot as a state for the last few years, and what are your thoughts this session?
Like I said earlier to another question, most of my attention has been on the bigger healthcare question of how do you fund Sooner Care 2.0 or the Trump STIP plan. And so I've looked at those bills at the first of session to see what was going on, but I haven't followed their progress up till now. I'd be happy to answer any questions on a particular bill. We need to make sure that mental health is treated like any other health condition, and that there's oftentimes there's a stigma with mental health And there's been a huge problem, not just in Oklahoma, but across the country, with making sure that people get adequate mental health services they need, and that needs to be a focus of everything we do.
One of the common discussions, law enforcement, whoever it would be, would say, we don't have enough beds when there's a crisis or somebody ends up in New Mexico, and there's a couple bills in both chambers about transport and telemedicine, all that stuff. But just in general, are there any discussions about attempts to add more crisis beds or internal care beds?
That's been part of the conversation for a long time. It's just a matter of how do you fund those and how do you make sure the money you is maximized in the number of beds you have. It's also about location of those beds, because a lot of times when you talk to law enforcement officials, someone may be picked up outside Tulsa and then have to be transported to the Panhandle for the available beds. So we need to make sure the beds are near the population they serve the best it can be. That's obviously a part of the ongoing discussion there.
You've been talking a lot about trying to find funding for Sooner Care 2.0. Are you also discussing funding if the traditional ballot initiative passes?
Right now, we're looking exclusively at the State Trump plan on the Sooner Care 2.0. Obviously, we'll have to be prepared if 802 passes, but that's not part of the ongoing discussions right now.
Why?
Because this has a much tighter deadline of trying to get revenue for the governor's plan. We have up until the end of session to look at potential solutions for 802.
Have you met with
What's
OEA
your-
yet?
I'm sorry?
I said, have you met with OEA yet?
That's a throwback question. I like that.
Sorry, Sean.
Now, what is your deadline on the Trump STIP funding?
It's rapidly approaching. The governor has some stated goals on that, and I think those are probably best answered by the governor's office on his actual timeline. I just know it's very quick.